Welcome to Dialed In on the Virtual Care Journey with Jeremy and Becca, your trusted companions in navigating the ever-evolving landscape of virtual care.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the Dialed In podcast, the Virtual Care Journey. I'm Becca Bean with Dial Care, and this is my good friend and mentor and colleague, Jeremy.
Hello.
Welcome. So, as I mentioned, he got kind of dragged here with us today in order to discuss with you guys everything around virtual care. So we're here to start a podcast to really just open up the conversation on the virtual care industry, telehealth, give you guys a history of who we are, what we do, but then also how the industry has continued to evolve over time, both pandemic, post-pandemic, pre-pandemic timeframes.
Yeah, it's definitely a delivery system we feel very passionate about, both as users, both being on the delivery model side, really interested. I know we share this a lot within Dial Care, is this where the industry is headed and how it can be used, the modalities that can be used, the treatments that can be performed, and most importantly, who's getting help. I know at some point we'll dive into the mental health programs that are out there and how that's really bringing, I think, a lot of people to mental health care that maybe wouldn't have done it on their own I would call it the traditional brick and mortar sense, right? I know we hear stories over and over again from people that just would not have sought mental health treatment if they didn't have a virtual avenue to do it. Now, that could be access driven, which we'll talk about at some point, I'm sure, but it could be stigma driven, at least in the mental health piece. So really interested to unpack it all. I'm sure we'll have guests over time. We have a lot of friends in the industry that have both been pioneers and are way forward thinking folks that really can offer some huge insights. So it'll be fun.
Yep. I think you guys are probably wondering, why are you listening to the two of us? Maybe we should give a little bit of background of who we are, how we got here. So Jeremy, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about who you are, your background? Yep. I mean, I've known you for over a decade, so everyone else needs to get the pleasure of your personality and company.
I'm Jeremy. I've been with our family of companies for the last 23 years. And for me, I came into the industry without any healthcare background. I was in a completely different industry, exited out of that, and honestly was young, married, and had to find a job, right? It's kind of the story for a lot of folks. And my wife had worked for us prior to me coming on board when I was in graduate school. So came here and really started to learn initially about dental, which is a big component of our services as well. And then as time passed and I just got more entrenched in the things that we do amongst our family of companies, I've just been really blessed to be able to do a lot of different things over those years. And one of those was we were very early adopters of telemedicine as a company, so not as a service offering. We didn't have the company even a thought of building a company for this yet, but ingrained virtual health in our employee benefits very early on. I feel like it was.
No, my first project starting at the Carrington family of companies was actually working on our contract with Teladoc back in 2008. So when they were still really new to the industry. So kind of been in that telehealth space for quite some time.
Yeah, so we were users of it for a long time and marketed it and sold it in a lot of places for a lot of companies that were out there. And then eventually, when we'll get into the story, but felt like it was time for us to build our own, which is where Dial Care was really conceived and thought about and built out for a lot of reasons that we wanted to address in the market. And so I've been with that project since the beginning and kind of rode that wave to where we are now, which is pretty awesome. So. Yep.
And you recently got a promotion, right?
I did. I'm now COO of all the Carrington companies, including Dial Care. I've been president of Dial Care for the last 5 or 6 years. So, yeah, it's still part of my daily kind of functions and definitely something that's near and dear for a multitude of reasons. I know one of the biggest things we'll get into is how we've both found passion for virtual care, right? It goes beyond just business offerings, and it makes good business sense and all of those things, which are sound, solid things for us to have as business leaders, but it goes so much deeper than that. There's a convenience play, which I know at some point we'll unpack, kind of convenience versus this is just a modality that makes more sense. And how in person, you already hit on it, talking about strep with one of your sons, like there's a lot of connectivity and interoperability that needs to be happening, sometimes in better ways than it's happening now. Sometimes it's going really well. And so from that perspective, it'll be interesting to really talk through why we feel so passionate about virtual health as a total topic and why we're kind of nerds for finding what other vendors are doing. I mean it lovingly. We're nerdy in this regard.
I think I've been called a nerd ever since like grade school, so it's nothing new here.
Childhood trauma. We'll unpack that one later. So from that side of it, it's just really something that the more you get into this space and dig in, the more you're like, man, there's some really amazing things happening in the market, whether or not DialCare is involved in that specifically or not. There's just some delivery systems and ways that care is being delivered and accessed. That's just really cool. So yeah, that's how I came to be in this world. So what's your path?
So into my story. So I started at the Carrington family of companies right out of college. So 21. Yes, I graduated college a little bit early. And Overachiever. Yeah, that probably does fall into my wheelhouse as well. Strong work ethic, I think, would probably be the better way I like to phrase it.
Are you building a resume on camera here?
Yeah, just a little bit. No, so I've been with Carrington, started with the telehealth space with our industry going. I know nothing about healthcare. I thought I was going to be working like as an accountant or in finance, and then landed working on a contract for telehealth because in 2008 it was really hard to find a job. So I landed at Carrington. And was just like, give me work. And I happily did whatever was asked of me. Through that, got to really spend a lot of time working with Jeremy once the decision was made to start DialCare. So it was kind of looking at everything that we've done as a company going, well, to do telehealth, you need to be able to do this. Oh, Carrington already does that. To do telehealth, you need to be able to do this. Oh, we already do that. How do we take the rails that we've already laid with some of our other companies and turn this into a virtual care offering? So at the time DialCare started, I was overseeing the Carrington project management office and really kind of worked with him closely as to what does it take to get everything started, building all those rails, and kind of stayed with it until moving over to DialCare full-time January 2020. A great time to switch over full-time to telehealth.
It's like you knew what was coming.
You knew it was coming. Yeah, that was like the panic call in March. I was actually in California when the world shut down. And I remember PTO and dialed into our team call huddle, and he was like, I'm surprised you dialed in. I was like, the whole world needs telehealth right now. Like, it's why we exist, and didn't skip a beat, kept our wait times down to under 15 minutes, which was not easy to do when no one was able to see providers in person. So really.
And the pandemic was an interesting catalyst in an industry that had been around a long time, right? And prior to that, there was talk a lot about utilization and a lot of times lack of utilization, right? And there's a ton of reasons why that existed. We can maybe explore in later episodes. But the reality was really in a 48-hour period, like the world literally did shut down, as all of us can remember. And so for whatever barrier to entry there may have been for people to use virtual care, none of it mattered anymore, right? There was very few choices, right? Obviously critical care items. There was essential treatment and those types of things that obviously had to be done in person. But for the most part, the reality for a lot of the day-to-day kind of primary care, urgent care, illnesses and questions all got pushed to virtual, right? In every clinical swim lane, right? It wasn't just a physician thing. This was across the board.
And it changed the way I think even providers thought about, how do I give care in this capacity, right? My grandfather was a physician in a small town. It was very common practice for someone to call him or stop by the house and just see him without any appointments. But he knew how to triage someone quickly over the phone. And I think most doctors inherently know how to do that, but add in HIPAA regulations and compliance, which the government did what they needed to do to kind of lift all of that so people could still have access. But if you were a specialist or a surgeon, like the type of care you gave was significantly different when done in a virtual capacity,
Sure.
let alone what tools they were using. And it was such a wild time to be living it, watching consumers also go, I would never have used this before. It just completely pivoted how people are accessing care.
There's certain treatment pathways that really, I think, benefited. Hard to say benefited from such a crazy time for all of us, but there were some silver linings that came out of that. I think mental health was one. I think just the overall realization and acceptance that there is a place for virtual care for those that didn't already know that, right? We were believers in it for a long time. And so with that, you then have the ability to talk about it differently. You have a different set of people who can give testimonials, for lack of a better word, as to how it's helped them. And I think it forced a lot of clinicians to reevaluate the why they do what they do the way they do it, when you now have this potential alternative option to whether triage or do post-surgical follow-up. There's a ton of places for this, right? Things that dial care may not necessarily be in directly, but
I was about to say, and then take it to whole different areas with AI coming into the picture now. There's so much that technology in healthcare and how virtual care is really going to change the landscape in medicine.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we use a punchline all the time, right? Like anytime you're feeling sick or whatever, and you search it, all the results pretty much just always say you're dying, right?
It's like you died by Google search based on typing in these five symptoms.
And being able to have somebody connect, whether it's phone, virtual, or even chat, to talk to a licensed clinician to say, listen, let's talk about what's actually happening, right? Whether that's in dental, whether that's in physician, psychiatric care, just mental health, counseling sessions, whatever the case may be. Virtual Vet is our latest product.
Don't forget our four-legged friends.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and again, you talk about COVID, like how many, I don't know all the stats, right? I'm sure we could look them up. Like how many people adopted pets, like all the stories were like, oh, all the shelters, they have no more pets, right? And then 6 months later, everyone's like, what did we do? Like, how do I take care of this?
Or the pets that became codependent and aren't used to being out of the house, which is my dog, who now decides to howl every time we leave the house. Yeah, she's a joy.
I'm glad I'm not your neighbor. So yeah, there's so many aspects to this for us to unpack. I think that's what will make it fun. Yeah. And again, we know so many great people in the industry that we'll hopefully bring in to give their perspective, and whether that's product driven or just kind of insight. I think it'll be really interesting because I think for me, what's really important, to the degree that we can influence it in the ways that we can, and it takes obviously tons of people to do it, but one of my I guess passion points around this industry is that I don't want us to lose the momentum, not us, just dial care, but like as a whole. And obviously we're not losing momentum from entrepreneurs and technology companies and a bunch of really cool things that are happening. But at the end of the day, we can't forget about who uses it, right? You can have really cool technology and really cool aspects and ways that you can deliver, but if the consumer either doesn't feel comfortable, doesn't understand it, it's too expensive, it's whatever the barrier to entry is, it really doesn't matter how cool it is and how revolutionary it is, right? So getting consumers, getting just your average person out there to understand exactly what it is, and even as important, what it isn't, right? We're not trying to replace in-person healthcare. It's impossible. No. It's never been the agenda of anybody in this world, in the virtual kind of health world. It's all about where is the right place for it, right? Yeah. And those are different answers amongst delivery systems and amongst what it's for. But what I've seen, and you've had tons of them too, are how many people will say, this is what changed as a result of the pandemic. This is how I now accessed my doctor for that time period. And I don't understand why it was ever any different.
Right.
Right. And so then what do we do as things have lifted and we've moved forward, and now you start to see some of that retreat back to kind of the old ways, and people are asking, why do I have to go in and do this now when it was just as effective before? And how do we get that groundswell into all of the stakeholders, right? Payers, CMS in some cases. When you talk about reimbursement, there's all of these areas that we need to make sure we're.
Yeah. And I think at the very end of the day, like Jeremy and I are so passionate about virtual care, getting someone seen at the right place at the right time, having clinicians practice to the top of their licensure, right? If you can have a clinician dealing with complex cases in person, that's what their time needs to be spent, and then dealing with the ones that can be done virtually and remotely as they can. So a little bit of background also. So Dial Care, we kind of got founded in 2017 is when we launched with our own employees, the official telehealth company. Our affiliate organization that we're with, Carrington, has lived and breathed in the benefit space. Started in 1979, really kind of with its core roots in dental. Everyone kind of mic dropped or was shocked when we launched with a physician program for Dial Care first, versus in the teledentistry space, which was our third product line. But you've heard us mention Carrington a few times, and I'm assuming the first few people listening to this already know who Jeremy and I are, but maybe eventually we'll have a few other listeners that are like, oh, a little bit of background. So right. Carrington's lived and breathed in dental, owns and operates dental networks. And then we started becoming a reseller of other ancillary products and services, telehealth being one of them in 2008. Vision, chiropractic, hearing care, travel benefits, ID theft, you name it. If it's something that can be embedded in an employee benefit, Carrington probably has a direct relationship to be able to offer a product or service for that. And we really then look and evaluate what products make sense to operate and own ourselves. And that's kind of how Dial Care came to fruition as a big piece of it. But hopefully we've given you guys enough of a tease to make you want to stay tuned and listen in when we chat again in episode 2. Yeah.
Let's hope so.
I mean, we're not that boring people, right?
We'll tell ourselves no. We'll believe in ourselves enough for a second episode.
There we go. So thanks for joining us today on Dialed In on the Virtual Care Journey. We're really excited that you listened to us today. Please feel free, if you have any questions, to connect with myself or Jeremy on LinkedIn, or feel free to visit us on dialcare.com for more information about the products and services that we offer. You can find this podcast on Google Podcasts, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you find your podcast needs.